The man who the president says he does not know. The breaking headline just in, the husband charged with murdering his wife, a mother of five. His attorney now says he is dead. After paramedics rushed to his home, he was found unresponsive. Tonight, what authorities have discovered at the home. Your health tonight, who's living longer, the news on life expectancy here in the U.S., and the difference now between men and women.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David
Listen
Muir.
up!
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Thursday night, and we begin with that new case, the first human-to-human case of the coronavirus here in the U.S. A couple in Chicago, the woman just back from China, and her husband now has it. It comes as the World Health Organization tonight has now declared the outbreak a global health emergency after a tenfold jump in cases in just a week. And in a sign authorities are taking this very seriously, a cruise ship has been quarantined in an Italian harbor. 7,000 people on board were waiting to find out whether a sick passenger from China had the coronavirus. And those Americans who had been evacuated from China, we showed you the pictures last night to that military base in California. They have now learned that if any of them tests positive for the virus, they'll all be quarantined for 2 weeks. ABC's Steve Osunsami leads us off. He's outside the CDC in Atlanta tonight.
This has gotten seriouser.
As health officials were declaring a global emergency today, this was the scene outside pharmacies across Asia where they were running out of face masks and people are desperate to protect themselves.
We're all in this together, and we can only stop it together.
Here in the U.S., what authorities have been predicting for more than a week has happened in Chicago, the nation's first person-to-person transmission of coronavirus. A man in his 60s got it from his wife. She returned from China January 13th, symptom-free, and felt sick 3 days later. Both husband and wife are hospitalized tonight in isolation.
I recognize that this news may raise people's concern, but I want to state clearly that this development is something we have been prepared for.
Outside China, there are now 98 confirmed cases of people sick with this respiratory disease, and 6 of those cases are here in America. The nearly 200 passengers who landed in California from Wuhan, China Wednesday are learning some disturbing news tonight. If just one of them tests positive for the coronavirus, they all may need to remain in quarantine at this military base for 2 weeks.
Our accommodations here on base.
It's supposed to be voluntary, and they were supposed to be able to leave by Saturday. A passenger who tried to get up and leave today was ordered by authorities to stay. Inside China, an epidemic. More than 8,000 people are sick and more than 170 dead. More cases than the SARS outbreak that swept through that country in 2003. Hundreds of Americans are still stuck there trying to get home. Priscilla Dickey and her daughter are 2 of them.
It's an interesting feeling. You're trapped, you're isolated.
U.S. authorities are scheduling another flight to Wuhan, China to pick up stranded Americans, and it could fly as early as Monday. In Italy, a coronavirus scare nearly ended this cruise. Our correspondent, Maggie Rulli, is there.
More than 6,000 passengers and crew were trapped on this cruise ship for more than 12 hours after a woman started showing flu-like symptoms. Now, a short time ago, her test came back negative for coronavirus, but authorities say this cruise ship quarantine shows just how high anxiety is right now around the globe.
There's a possible vaccine that's on the way, but it's still months away from clinical trials.
All right, so let's get to Steve. He's live outside the CDC in Atlanta tonight. And Steve, so many watching this unfold, not only here in the U.S., but around the world. What are the symptoms of coronavirus, and who are authorities saying are most susceptible?
Well, authorities say that the symptoms are fever, cough, and shortness of breath, and they're really paying attention to anyone who has traveled to or from the affected region. But they point out that these symptoms are very similar to the flu, which has been much more deadly. They say in the U.S. this season, more than 8,000 estimated deaths in the U.S. this flu season alone. David?
Steve Osunsami leading us off tonight. Thank you, Steve, and we'll stay on it. We're going to turn now to the impeachment trial of President Trump. In that dramatic moment today, the Chief Justice refusing to read one senator's question, that senator storming out. And tonight, the battle now over John Bolton. Do Republicans have the votes to block him from testifying? That vote expected tomorrow. And if there's a tie, will the Chief Justice play any role? Mary Bruce up on the Hill again tonight.
For the first time today in the Senate,
responsible for murdering and wounding thousands of Americans and actively planning new attacks, but we stopped him cold.
Now we're learning new details. On December 29th at Mar-a-Lago, meeting with his national security team, President Trump authorized the Soleimani killing. And more actions that never took place, including bombing Iranian Navy ships, missile launchers, and air defense systems. 3 days after killing Soleimani came the most critical and dangerous moments. Military officials tell NBC News intelligence platforms observed Iran moving missiles into place. Two officials say the U.S. sent a note to Iran through neutral Switzerland, threatening an overwhelming response if Iran launched ballistic missiles at U.S. forces. Iran did it anyway, launching more than a dozen at the Al-Assad air base. While no Americans were killed, more than 50 suffered brain injuries. Then Iran quickly announced that its response was over, and President Trump de-escalated. Multiple current and former military officials tell NBC News they worry President Trump may be tempted to take more risks again, and that the U.S. remains on a hair trigger for potential conflict with Iran.
We are poised on a knife's edge. If Americans had been killed, we would be in an ongoing war now with Iran.
And Richard joins me now. Richard, what are we hearing from Iran about all this?
So we reached out to Iranian officials, and they gave us a statement saying that Iran does not anticipate any further escalation of hostilities. But U.S. officials remain on the lookout to see if Iran will retaliate, particularly in a way that will be hard to pin on Iran.
All right, Richard Engel, thanks very much. There's breaking news tonight about the company that operates the helicopter that crashed and killed Kobe Bryant and 8 others.
It will not be business
there.
President Trump's supporters lined up early for tonight's campaign rally, part of an administration-wide effort to steal attention from Democrats days before Monday's caucuses. Vice President Pence is already here.
America will never be
what they do, and you heard even in the austere
of executive power, and just trying not to make.
Joe Biden clearly can't handle the campaign trail. How could he potentially handle the business of the United States?
What's with the House of the Rising Sun music in the background there? I mean,
yes,
it's funny.
Loud music.
Who's at the jukebox? I want to get.
Over the coronavirus. Here in this country, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed a 6th case of the coronavirus here in the U.S., and this one is unlike any of the others. Correspondent Jonathan Seri tells us why tonight from Atlanta, home to the CDC.
Public health officials have confirmed the first U.S. case of person-to-person transmission of a new coronavirus that has already sickened nearly 8,000 people in China and claimed at least 170 lives. The patient is the husband of a Chicago traveler who became ill shortly after returning from the Chinese city of Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak.
This person-to-person spread was between 2 very close contacts, a husband and wife. The virus is not spreading widely across the community at this time.
Concerned about increasing case counts in China and human-to-human spread in other countries, the World Health Organization has declared a global emergency.
The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems.
To coordinate the U.S. response, the Trump administration announced the creation of a presidential coronavirus task force led by Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar.
The president is ensuring that we are proactively preparing and also taking the necessary steps to prevent or mitigate any potential further spread of that virus here in the United States.
A team from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention continues to monitor nearly 200 U.S. diplomats, employees, and family members who voluntarily evacuated Wuhan aboard this jetliner. The State Department is planning additional flights with capacity for private U.S. citizens willing to reimburse the cost and undergo health screening. Passengers returning on this initial flight are staying at March Air Reserve Base in California until screeners determine they pose no threat of spreading the virus. Local health officials say they issued a quarantine order for one passenger who attempted to leave before getting the all clear. Brett?
Jonathan Terry in Atlanta. Jonathan, thank you. The U.S. economy grew at a moderate 2.1% annual rate in the final 3 months of last year. That matches the gain of the third quarter. It puts the yearly growth figure at 2.3%, the lowest in 3 years. The Dow erased a 244-point drop to finish ahead 125 today. The S&P 500 gained.
It's good that they have gotten a special commission to overlook the coronavirus. God, I didn't realize that it was spreading like that. That's so sad, especially if it's going human to human.
Gain 10. The Nasdaq.
Lord.
Senator Page holding Democrats accountable if the government won't. He is suing the Democrat National Committee for funding false opposition research used by the FBI to spy on him. The story next.
Good luck, buddy. Good luck.
And with Rudy Giuliani seeming to be kind of a shadow secretary.
She's tough. I think she's great, but I think there's a reason why she was undecided. And when she finds out now that she's the decisive vote, I'm not sure where she's going to go. But again, I don't think there's any reason to believe this Chief Justice is going to jump into this fight. I don't think so.
Well, I hate to start out by correcting the very powerful and wonderful and smart moderator, but I was a state prosecutor, not a federal prosecutor. And I can assure you documents are a prosecutor's best friend.
Right. They just
documents allow a prosecutor to connect the dots, to hold witnesses to testimony, and in this instance, think of what those documents would reveal. So here's the thing about Adam Schiff's offer of 1 week. The only reason that this could be hard would be because the Republicans would want to make it hard. If they want the truth to come out, this would be very easy and it would be quick. So
who's the Republicans? I'm sorry, Claire. You mean the president?
The president
Who's going to make it
the
easy?
White House.
You think the president's going to make this easy?
No, but my point is, Chris, that they are complaining about being it hard and taking too long, and they're the ones that would make it take too long. So it's like, okay, hey, we can't do this because we're going to screw it up. So we don't want to do it because it's going to take too long because we're going to try to make sure it takes too long. If they don't want it to last a long time, it could go very quickly. We know there's not that many witnesses that are relevant, especially if the Chief Justice was allowed to rule on relevancy. He knows what's relevant and isn't. It's law what's relevant and what isn't. This isn't a political thing, it's a law thing.
Senator, that's an argument, but have we seen any evidence of their willingness to give?
No, I'm
From
just
the very beginning of this, they have fought everything right down to every document, every bit of evidence, every bit of testimony. They have fought to the last possible moment, to the point we haven't gotten anything from them.
My point is not that they will do it. My point is they're trying to hide the evidence. They're going to continue to try to hide the evidence. They're complaining that they aren't trying to hide the evidence because it would be too hard and it would take too long. And the only reason it'd be hard is because they're trying to hide the evidence. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
They are trying to cover up the evidence and not let the American people see what happened.
And that point is valid as an argument on moral, legal, constitutional grounds. But do you really trust the Republicans to ever make this easy?
Absolutely not.
Okay, we agree.
Oh, absolutely not.
Very interesting. What in the Senate they might call a colloquy.
I'm sorry.
Is it a colloquy?
A little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, we will go back.
From his body language, I don't think he's convinced yet.
Well, you shouldn't sit like this if you're at a colloquy.
And we're going to continue it and bring in the rest of our panelists. We have, of course, more views to bring in, but I have to get immediately to U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar on the Judiciary Committee. We should mention also presidential candidate and joining us on your dinner break. We appreciate that. Good evening, Senator.
Sorry. Yes. I enjoyed your discussion, and especially hearing from my friend Claire, who actually headed up the last Senate impeachment trial committee, of which I was a member.
Of Judge Porteous.
Involving Judge Porteous.
Confirmed cases, and that includes a death toll that has now jumped to 213 people killed. The number of coronavirus infections there has now exceeded that of SARS infections worldwide during that outbreak in the early 2000s.
More than 9,000.
The first flight carrying South Korean evacuees from the Chinese city of Wuhan has now just landed in Seoul. Several hundred South Korean nationals are on board that flight, and they all went through vigorous health screenings in Wuhan before they were allowed to board the jet. They're all going through re-screening in the South Korean capital, Seoul, and they will be put into shelters reportedly for as long as 2 weeks. South Korean authorities also are reportedly negotiating with China to send additional evacuation flights to Wuhan.
Now, Stephen Zhang is in Beijing with much more. Stephen, let's begin with what we've heard today from the WHO and the WHO director, basically saying that the declaration to call a public health emergency wasn't a vote of no confidence for China. But did the WHO give any advice, any suggestions for how the Chinese should be dealing with the spreading of the virus?
Well, you say, the big difference from now on, of course, is China is expected to coordinate much more closely with the rest of the world when it comes to its containment effort of this coronavirus. Now, from Beijing's perspective, of course, they are saying we have been doing that, and in a foreign ministry statement to respond to the latest news out of WHO, a spokeswoman said China has always been responsible and transparent when it comes to sharing information and data with the rest of the international community. And she said the measures that have been put in place by the Chinese authorities have been the most comprehensive and most stringent measures, far exceeding often what's required of it under international health regulations. And she, of course, highlighted the fact that the WHO Director General has been affirming and praising China's efforts in public. And that seems to be echoed by what the Director General has just said. Here's what the Director General of the WHO said.
The Chinese government is to be congratulated for the extraordinary measures it has taken to contain the outbreak.
I agree.
Despite the severe social and economic impact those measures are having on the Chinese people. We would have seen many more cases outside China by now, and probably deaths, if it were not for the government's efforts and the progress they have made to protect their own people and the people of the world.
And state media outlets here, of course, have all reported this latest development out of WHO, but they are emphasizing that at this juncture, the WHO is not recommending any travel or trade restrictions against China. Lisa and Cyril.
Stephen, since this started, we've been trying to get a sense of where it might be going, right? What the timeline on this might be. One of China's leading experts on respiratory infections says that it might peak soon.
That's right. He did say that, but remember, that's one expert's opinion. That's not considered the official government assessment, even though that expert is very much involved in this effort and a top government advisor. Now, his assessment is based on the fact that in 10 days or so, the epicenter, Hubei province, will have been under lockdown for more than 2 weeks. And a lot of the travel restrictions and other measures nationwide would have been put in place around the same period of time. So given the incubation period of this virus is about 14 days and maximum, so he thinks at that time the government will have a clearer idea in terms of who might have been infected and who have not been. So this assessment, of course, is just one a person's opinion at this juncture. Now, the government here is obviously facing another hurdle right now. That is the official holiday is going to end soon. So they're going to be dealing with a lot of people, millions of them on the move. That's why we're seeing strengthened screenings, a lot of measures around transportation hubs around the country. Isa and Cyril.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
But I want to throw something else in there. These people that's discussing this right now probably don't realize that they have recently found a case up in Chicago that is going person to person. And now because it's going person to person, that sheds a brand new light upon the timeline toward the incubator system of how long that it's going to continue to stay active. Especially if we know now that it's going person to person. I just got through talking about this to a family right down the road here that recently got hit by a tornado, that they're very grateful that God spared their lives. But we was discussing that if something like this was to hit in a pandemic form to the point that the United States government literally had to shut down cities, Atlanta, LA, New York, Houston, Dallas, Phoenix, San Francisco, Denver, Colorado, other big hubs, and New York and Boston and Indianapolis and Nashville and Chattanooga and Memphis and St. Louis and places like that, that it would literally cause pandemonium, because people would be going out onto the streets, taking their aggression out on each other, because it would affect so many people that's got car payments, house payments, making other type of bills, people's everyday lives. It would just put such of a strain on the American normalcy that it would literally cause pandemonium, to the point that the government would have to call out the military and possibly even put the United States under martial law if it was to get that bad here in the U.S. That's how crazy that people are over here. And because they've got so many guns, and because people has already pretty near lost their minds, it would be anarchy. It would be pandemonium. It would be sad. It would be adding insult to injury. And the thing about it is, if this continues to escalate over in China and in other countries, this could eventually affect commerce towards how much food is either going into China, or how many products is coming out of China to go distribute into other places. In other words, the things that's available right now, I'm thinking of the worst, and I hope to God that it doesn't happen. But the things that are available now on the shelves, regardless whether it be this, that, or that, may not be available. Because this could literally stifle, almost like a third world war, to the point that governments had to restrain people from obtaining this, and this, because they had to use it strictly for emergency personnel purposes. You know, during World War II, you couldn't go out here and just buy all the tires that you wanted. Those tires was restricted. Same way with gas. The same way with lots of stuff during World War II, because it had gotten that crucial to society that they was leaving the cream of the crop for the military personnel and for emergency personnel, so that if all else fails, they could always have something to go by pertaining to the military. And I know I'm probably, and I hope to God that I am, overemphasizing. I really do. I hope that I'm overstating the severity of all this. But to look at the figures that we've already had now, more cases, 9,000, than other outbreaks, and as quickly as this is growing, and now today, the World Organization declares a virus global health emergency, declares a virus global health emergency. They're just telling us what we want, what we need to hear. God only knows what they know to be able to declare something like that. So that particular organization, or that particular World Health global organization, may very well be looking at something that they haven't yet exposed to the general public as far as the severity of all this. I said they could. I didn't say they was. I said they could. So don't underestimate her or add to or take from my words. And once more, I hope to God that they can control this, because whenever something like this gets leashed out into society, it can literally bring cultures to their knees. And you know, it speaks about that in the first 4 chapters of Revelations, to repent, 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 or else I will throw thee off into a sick bed. We have already been in a sick bed here in America now for quite some time, pertaining to the venereal diseases, pertaining to AIDS, pertaining to diabetes, pertaining to cancer, pertaining to all these kids not having no morals, towards aborting all these children, towards brothers having sex with their sisters, incest. We have already been subjected under a form or a type of pandemic sicknesses here in America. They just haven't declared it as such because our doctors has been stable enough to stabilize various situations to kind of keep it under the carpet, out of sight, out of mind, per se. But if the truth be known, if people really got to looking at the sexual transmitted diseases in America, and if they got to looking at all the other diseases that has just recently just topped the scales pertaining to people dying or almost dying of these type of protrusions, we're probably already at the scale of a global health emergency. Right here in the USA, without it being the coronavirus. But now we're going to have to add that into the mix. This is not good, folks. This is not Hollywood. This can affect people's lives. This can come home. This can come to my home. This can come to your neighborhood. This can come to your state. This can come to your factory. This can come to your life in one form or the other. If it don't affect you directly, it could affect you indirectly by you knowing somebody that has it that winds up perishing over it. So please, please, please do not take what is happening with a grain of salt. This needs to be looked upon in a most serious matter. This is not Hollywood. This is not something to mess with. A matter of fact, even to this day, it is still one of the number one concerns in the United States military, and I'm sure it is in other militaries too as well, as far as other governments, towards being possibly one of society's number one enemies that could literally take out a great deal of people, especially the people that are elderly, the people that already has some sort of illness, like me being on diabetic 2 and already having to take insulin. My system is not built up like it should be. So because my system is not built up like it should be, I have to take stronger measures in hoping that I don't catch a disease like this, because if I was, I don't know that my immune system would be strong enough to pull through it. That's one reason why that I went ahead and got a flu shot long about November. Or it may have been earlier than that. It may have been in August that I got the flu shot. But people that are more susceptible, or people that are children that hasn't got strong immune system, people that have sickly already problems, the elderly, this can be devastating into people's lives, especially if you're saying now that it is reaching a level of passing human to human. It needs to be dealt with effectively, efficiently, and swiftly.
That's really good context.
That's
Thank you
really
very much.
interesting because, of course, people have been on holiday, but also they're expecting to go back to work. If they're at work, is work paid for the time? What
happens when they have to go back to their normal lives and their working lives?
And of course, we'll talk about the impact on the economy a bit later on the show, because this is crucial to that. Well, our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, breaks down what the new declaration by the World Health Organization means. Take a look.
The designation of public health emergency of international concern really came about after the SARS outbreak back in 2003. The World Health Organization wanted a way to basically send a signal to all these countries to potentially get resources and funding at least allocated to countries that would need it, and to address things like travel and trade. And that's really what this public health emergency declaration means now. They say that this is a sudden, unexpected outbreak that has worldwide implications. Now, clearly, this has been an emergency in China for some time. It was an emergency in China the last time the World Health Organization considered this. What has changed over the last several days is that this coronavirus is now in several other countries around the world and is spreading in several countries as well, at least 6 now, including China. So that's part of what's driving this. It does not mean there is new resources or funding specifically, but it might mean that there is an allocation of funding to places, again, that need it. It also means that countries within the next couple of days should really look at their own public health measures to make sure they're doing everything they can to mitigate the spread of this coronavirus. Only a few times in history have these public health emergency declarations been made. H1N1 back in 2009, polio, 2014, Ebola, 2014, Zika, 2016, and Ebola again in 2018. So this obviously is not taken without significant consideration. They recognize, the World Health Organization recognizes there will be an impact overall on the economies of several countries around the world as a result of this declaration, but they still say that it's important to do to try and slow down the spread.
To educate
the numbers of coronavirus infected do continue to grow. What we're starting to try and learn, though, is it possible there is a large population of people who do carry the coronavirus, are infected, but are showing minimal or no symptoms? If that's the case, that might mean this is more like a bad cold, bad flu versus a new pandemic that is very deadly. That is what public health researchers are trying to figure out right now. This is a rapidly changing story. As we get new numbers and new information, we'll certainly bring it to you.
Sanjay Gupta there for us with the very latest. Well, I want to take you to those living in the epicenter of the outbreak, because they remain mostly indoors, leaving the streets across Wuhan largely empty.
Yeah, there's a similar story.
See, and that's something else to consider, is that over in China, they've been going through their lunar holiday. And because of it, ordinarily, their whole country shuts down anyway during the celebration. In other words, this gives families time to come together towards family, doing the family thing, and basically shutting down the factories anyway. So people has been basically quarantining themselves rather than it being a major mandated order of keeping the disease isolated. Now, since they're going to be going back to work, factories are going to be opening up, how much more is that going to stir the pot of people that their diseases have been sitting dormant, and now they're going to spread it to somebody else because they have no choice but to go back to work? That could even increase the pandemic even more. So there's lots of things here to put into the equation towards what could happen within the next 7, 10, 20, 30 days globally, worldwide. There's lots of things to keep in mind here because, like I said, a lot of these families have been staying at home, keeping it dormant, keeping it confined, to where there's only been certain people that's been in contact with this. Well, as soon as they open up their normal practices and all their factories going back to work, that means people's going to be up stirring. They're going to be getting on trains. They're going to be getting on subways. They're going to be interacting with each other. And if we know that it can be passed from person to person, this could not be a good thing. A matter of fact, more than likely this is going to be a bad thing. Now, once more, I'm just speaking from an individual level, a concerned citizen. Because whenever I first looked at this, God spoke to my heart and said, this is going to be serious. And I thought, because of the problems that I've had up here in Weakley County towards them trying to mark me as being somebody that was stirring up trouble as far as somebody causing a panic that shouldn't have been causing a panic, I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to wait this out. I'm going to wait it out another day and just see where this is going to go. And, of course, whenever it went from 17 to 27 overnight, I knew then, hey, this is escalating. Now they're talking about 213 dead and over 9,000 that's declared as having the disease. And now they're saying that it can be passed from human to human. They have recognized that it can be caught from human to human. In other words, it's not isolated in one particular area. In other words, if you got it, you was somewhere and you got it from some person or something, and you got on an airplane and come over here, now it could start all over again over here the same way that it is over there, or the same way that it could start in other areas. So this is serious. It does not need to be taken lightly. Let's listen to the rest of this.
In many cities across mainland China, David Culver shows us what it's like.
A normally traffic-jammed highway in the city of Wuhan, China, near empty, only a few passing vehicles. Public transportation shut down. City buses sit untouched. Only a few residents spotted outside. Eerie for a city 11 million people call home. Major food chains closing to customers, from Starbucks to KFC to McDonald's. Lights off inside. This Walmart open and crowded. Shoppers wearing face masks inside and quickly buying up what's left, leaving bare produce stands behind. Outside the lockdown zone, similar scenes across mainland China.
There's 24 million people in Shanghai, and I'm walking in the middle of the street.
American college student Jenna Davidson arrived in Shanghai a few weeks ago for the spring semester.
You know, we got here before the outbreak, and it went south really quick.
She says finding food in the massive city has gotten increasingly difficult.
They shut down our campus. We almost felt as though they didn't realize that we were still living on it, because we didn't even have like hot water for a few days, and the cafeterias on campus are closed. So we started realizing, well, we need food, and most stores within walking distance have been shut down, or it's like zombie land in there. Everyone's fighting for what's left on the shelves.
Jenna initially tried to keep positive.
This is the guy who takes my temperature 9 times a day.
She even sent this photo to her dad, trying to reassure him.
For a while, I wasn't telling my dad everything, but he was finding out on the news just how bad it was. So it's been hard on him.
She and her fellow classmates now booked on flights to get out. Destination, anywhere but here.
Where are you going?
Africa.
Who do you know in Africa?
I don't know anyone in Africa. And what's most stressful is, even though we're leaving, I still don't feel like we're in the clear yet, because what if we catch it in the taxi or at the airport, on the way home, on the plane? We still need to be very careful. It's not over yet.
Back in Wuhan, social media shows how some residents keep moving inside their own homes, finding normalcy within the lockdown. But a look outside, and you're reminded life here is anything but normal. David Culver, CNN, Beijing.
With us now, a Canadian citizen who is trapped in Wuhan. Wayne Duplessis is a teacher living there with his family. He would like to leave. Wayne, let's find out what it's like for you and your family to live under lockdown.
Okay, good morning, Issa and Cyril. I hope I didn't mangle
Good morning, Wayne. No, you didn't. Go ahead.
Do now.
Okay. what's it like? It's nerve-wracking. It's worrying. It's quite quiet. Eerie is the right word for it.
Eerie. What are the streets like? How are you getting by with food? How do you survive day to day? I mean, do you have enough food to get by?
Right now, we're okay. We've been out 3 times to the shops to buy food, and the first time was just before the day before. We had been on holiday, and we had been in Shanghai and Hangzhou and Suzhou. We came back on the Monday afternoon. Tuesday, we went out and did a shop, and Wednesday, the lockdown came. Unexpected.
So wait, you've been out 3 times in what, the last week, 8 or 9 days?
Yeah, I was out yesterday. Masked and, wearing my glasses, of course, hat, gloves. So my wife and I went out and left our son home. We went out to buy rice and to buy water, to buy some essentials. But yeah, you don't go out without being covered.
Wayne, we said in the introduction that you wanted to get out. I just want to double check. Do you want to leave Wuhan, or what measures have you taken to try to leave? Let's clarify that.
Okay. We have contacted the Canadian Embassy and we've registered. And my wife, who is Chinese Indonesian, has contacted the Indonesian Embassy. And I have 2 sons here. My other son is a teacher on the other side of the city, and we haven't seen him since the lockdown. We keep in touch. So my wife and my older son are Indonesian citizens, and my youngest son is a dual citizen, Indonesian and Canadian. So we're trying to get out together. So if we can't do that, then we'll stay together. My concern, of course, is the safety of the plane, not just for us, but for other people as well. I think that, as you mentioned,
right.
There's a 14-day incubation period where you can be asymptomatic and not know. And so for me, there's a fear of being on a plane and not knowing whether you're spreading this or other people are spreading this. And then to go from this relatively secure environment to an insecure environment, and then back to a secure environment during a quarantine, I guess a 2-week quarantine wherever you go. It's the health workers that will bear the brunt of this, as they have in many countries, including Canada.
Yeah.
Have the Chinese authorities or the municipal authorities at any level told you what the next steps are going to be and how long they expect to have to keep everybody under lockdown?
No, we hear from our school, and the school is already taking steps to do online instruction. So this is about as much as we know right now. What we get from the Chinese government is the basic measures to stay healthy, masks and hand sanitizers and things of that nature. But if you're seeing in the video, the streets are quiet and people are not gathering.
Is there a sense of fear as the numbers increase and increase rapidly, as we've been reporting here every day? What's the mood been like on the streets, Wayne?
Yeah, people are concerned. Yesterday was the first time that I saw more palpable tension. I don't want to oversay this. I don't want to overplay this, but, we were at a store and the store was closed for cleaning and people were starting to get agitated. But given that, they were still polite, they were still queuing, they still waited. And as did we.
What's the Chinese media reporting that you're seeing on this, and where are you getting information?
Well, we get information from a lot of different sources, but we've got a WeChat group that we're sharing with local teachers, and we stay in touch with the school, and we stay in touch with some of our local co-workers. But we share a lot of information back and forth in this WeChat. We're trying to keep each other informed. We're trying to keep each other and our families alive.
Wayne Duplessis, appreciate you taking time to speak to us here. Please keep us up to date about your travels, what you're doing, what you're being told, and when you do, eventually, if you do, obviously, get out, we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, good luck
and
to
your
you,
family.
your wife, your sons, and the residents in Wuhan, both
Absolutely.
Chinese and foreign. Thank you.
Thank you very
It's
much.
interesting what he was saying. Thank you. And interesting what you're saying, which is what we heard from the previous guest, is that being in a closed area, they feel slightly more protected than actually going to the airport,
Yeah, he's
getting on a
concerned
plane.
about actually getting on
It's
the plane.
exactly what the previous guest said. Well, later we'll talk about the economic impact of the virus, not just businesses, airlines, as well as China's economy, but a ripple effect on global markets. We'll be showing you where the market's been reacting day by day. Well, we speak to CNN's global economic analyst, Rana Faroha. Joins us in about 50 minutes or so, so make sure to tune in for that.
And we continue to monitor the developments in the impeachment trial in the U.S. Senate, the impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald J. Trump. We're still looking at that. We're not going away from that story. Just to let you know what's happening right now, the senators are on a break, and that's why we can get in there and give you other world news. So we'll take you back there live as soon as that resumes, probably about 30 minutes from now.
Now, still to come, airstrikes against hospitals and homes are really tormenting the people in Syria. The most vulnerable population, as always, children. We're on the ground with the very latest in Syria.
Safety is but a relative concept. The comfort of four walls, cleanliness, it feels like a distant dream.
Lord God. Lord, Lord, Lord.
Muhammad's grandmother, Khadija, can barely find enough clean water to wash. She hasn't showered in over a month. The children are all getting sick. She's not entirely sure they will be safe here. Regime forces backed by the Russians are taking over more rebel-held territory. The fear that terror is not new. Part of a cycle that is now Syria's reality, where parents don't know how to protect their children, and life is little more than getting through the hours. In a 10-day time span this month, around 100 civilians were killed, a third of them children. In this video shot by the White Helmets in the Aleppo countryside, a mother grimly picks through the dirt for the remains of her 14-year-old son, Mohammed. She cries out. There is no solace for this kind of pain. A pain felt by too many. Snippets of it blurred together in countless videos that have emerged over the last 9 years. May God not forgive you, Bashar, this woman cries out. The rescue worker runs past her screaming. Where are they? Get out, quickly, he yells at the children searching for the wounded. A woman is carried out shouting. A child's corpse lies in the rubble. The last rebel stronghold is being squeezed, suffocated by air and on the ground. The physical and emotional effect on children profound, yet unaddressed. Those who make it live in this filth. Lucky by comparison, even without proper shoes or shelter, they are, at least for now, alive.
God.
Despite declarations of
Thank you had
ceasefires
to live
in
in
name
that.
only and condemnations, it continues like a macabre movie on repeat, stealing childhoods before they can even begin. Arwa Damon, CNN, Istanbul.
Oh, look at you.
Don't you worry about paying
So much misery.
for all that.
Oh, Lord. So much misery.
You're a champion of the gay community. Full accountable.
Back to our top story, the Wuhan coronavirus. Some cities are like ghost towns because of it. Hong Kong is one of them. The city was hit hard by SARS in the early 2000s, and as CNN's Will Ripley explains, residents this time are just taking no chances.
In Hong Kong, a city full of empty stores. This one has a line around the block. A 3-hour wait for surgical face masks.
They give only one pack for one person.
Are you coming back tomorrow?
Oh, maybe.
We need more masks.
Demand is high, supplies are low, stores are quickly running out.
They seem not to have anticipated the seriousness of the problem, and then it came so quickly.
The same Hong Kong leaders who tried to ban protesters from wearing masks to hide their faces now cover their own. The government is taking emergency measures to prevent a public health catastrophe, severely restricting travel from mainland China, the epicenter of the outbreak. Normally, there would be a steady stream of people from mainland China coming through these now locked doors. High-speed rail service is suspended until further notice, and that's really having a knock-on effect because this adjacent mall, just like malls all over Hong Kong, pretty much deserted. Hong Kong has about 300 reasons not to take any chances. That's how many people died in the SARS outbreak 17 years ago in 2003. This neighborhood, Amoy Gardens, was ground zero. Are people living here scared that that could all happen again?
I think all Hong Kong people were scared something like SARS would happen again in Hong Kong. All people.
Those who lived through Hong Kong's darkest days describe psychological terror akin to 9/11, only stretched out for months. That fear of an invisible enemy has many heeding the government's advice. Stay inside, avoid crowds. If possible, work from home. It's almost easy to forget that we're in the middle of the Lunar New Year here. This is supposed to be one of Hong Kong's busiest tourism weeks of the year. But all we have are these decorations. All the public events have been canceled. The people are gone. More than 7 months of protest emptied out hotels, stores, and restaurants. Now, it's even worse. Have you ever seen a Chinese New Year like this, so slow?
No, never.
Never in your life?
Never.
Since the 50 year, I haven't seen for that.
Sales are down 70%, he says. And this was supposed to be a good week. Hong Kong's economy was already on life support. Wow. Now, an even bigger worry for some. Staying alive. Will Ripley, CNN, Hong Kong.
In the last few minutes, China has just reported the number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the country has risen by almost 2,000 in the past day. That's bringing the total number to almost 9,700. The risk of coronavirus is hitting airlines, as you've seen here on CNN, air travelers, it's hitting them hard. Multiple major air carriers as well have been cancelling or in fact suspending flights to and from parts of China. The airlines include the likes of British Airways, American Airlines, Air Canada, KLM, Lufthansa, United, and many others. You can see them there on your screen. This after multiple governments advised against non-essential travel to the country. Across Asia and elsewhere, those traveling from China are facing strict screening upon arrival, as we've shown you from Seoul, really to even in the United States and in Europe. In just about an hour, markets are set to begin, are set to open in Asia after coronavirus worries on Thursday sent them sliding. The Hong Kong Hang Seng dropped 2.6%. That's a loss, if you can see that, a loss of just 5%, in fact, just 2 days. Nikkei is up almost 1%. South Korea's Kospi ended down, though, just over 1.5%. Let's bring in CNN Global Economic Analyst Rana Faraj, who's a global business columnist and associate editor for the Financial Times, a well-known face here on the network. Rana, thanks very much for being with us. We just outlined we're seeing flights being cancelled, we're seeing a pause in spending as people beginning to hunker down. And with that, I assume a pause in production, a pause in borrowing. What does a health scare on this scale do to an economy like China's? How damaging is it, Rana?
Well, it's not just even the Chinese economy we're talking about, but the global economy. A lot of folks are looking back at the SARS scare in 2003 and saying, is this going to be like that? That was an incident that took, a lot off of a quarter or two of Chinese growth. Ultimately, China was still growing around 10% back then. But times have changed. China is much more integrated in the global economy. Chinese tourists are really driving global tourism and travel. It's interesting. I just actually came last week from Istanbul. Luxury hotels were empty, and the concierges were telling me, this is because the Chinese aren't traveling. So there is a lot of outbound investment from China now that was not the case back then. you're also seeing so much more integration with supply chains. You know, the Wuhan area is very important in terms of global supply chains. I'm hearing folks in the tech industry say this could be a lasting effect. China has made up the biggest portion of global growth in the last few years. So to have a hit like this, I think we're in unprecedented territory just because China is so much more integrated and so much of a bigger part of the global economy today.
When you say a lasting effect that you heard from the tech industry, they think it's going to have a lasting effect. Why would that be the case? Because typically, you know, you have a flare-up of something like this, and obviously you have to redirect or pause business activity, suspend it for a while. But why do you think the effect will last beyond the outbreak?
Well, you have to think about the context. I mean, the U.S. and China, even though we've recently gotten a trade deal, we're already in the process of decoupling, right? So there's a lot of turmoil in this sector. Tech, even with all the trade conflict we've seen, is still very integrated, very linked to China. So that's why you're seeing those stocks that are highly leveraged in this area take a hit. I think that there's going to be a sense of fragility in the markets because of this. I mean, a lot of us have thought for some time that the global markets, and particularly U.S. stocks, are due for a correction. And that correction can come from anywhere. You know, it can be a health crisis like what we've seen. It could be exploding debt somewhere we don't see. But whatever it is, the markets are really at a point where at a very late stage in the cycle, a lot of fragility. They're ready to break. And I think when that happens, you start to see a snowball effect that's very difficult to stop.
Yeah, and like you were saying, it comes at a difficult time for China, expecting to turn the corner, of course, in the first half of this year. So very different. Give us a sense, Orana, what kind of impact did SARS have on the Chinese economy? Because I remember back then, obviously, the economy was going, 13% or something along those lines, compared to now, which is hovering roughly around 6% GDP.
I want to use the analogy of a yo-yo. You know, as a yo-yo starts at your finger and starts the downward motion, it actually picks up speed and it gets faster. And then as soon as it gets right to the bottom of the string and it reverses itself, that is at its quickest point, kind of like a pop whipping. But then as soon as it reverses its momentum, it immediately starts going in the opposite direction. And in other words, instead of it being growth, it's now working on a negative perspective, because it's now moving in the opposite direction. And there's other analogies that I could use to give you that same type of ideal of how that the economy, if it's flowing and it has let me think of the right word for a horse. If you're on a horse and a horse has a gallop, it's fallen into a gallop right before it gets into a full spread run. Once you break that stride and you reverse that stride, it has an effect upon things that you would never believe that would have effect on. It could have an effect on chewing gum. It could have an effect on TVs. It could have an effect on cellular phones. It could have an effect on just about anything that used to be considered available, now is not available. And it puts such of a strain on everything in general, because now things is going in the opposite direction. That's what they're afraid is going to happen to the global markets because of this hiccup, this bump in the road. Like I said, it's similar to the analogy of something spinning in one particular direction, and then all of a sudden it changes its direction. It can have a profound effect upon markets. It can have a profound effect up onto economies in countries that you would not had ever imagined that it would. It could have a profound effect upon steel. It could have a profound effect upon to medical supplies. It could have a profound effect upon the medicine. We get the majority of our medicine from over in those areas. It can have a profound effect upon to the world economy, the world global economy. That's what they're talking about here. In which I realize they're only speculating, and I hope to God that it doesn't. But if you'll put things in the right perspective, lining up with biblical Bible prophecy, that if they did not repent, they would be thrown off into a sick bed. America has already been thrown off into a sick bed. Why do you think that our health care insurance is as expensive, and our drugs are as expensive, and our hospitals are shutting down their doors, and we have clinics that people are just literally just at the brink of dying right here in America because of health issues? You know, whenever you get to looking at the problems over in LA of the homeless out in California, they are distributing diseases out into the ocean because things is being washed into the gutter system that is being flushed out into the oceans that is poisoning the water out into the oceans. In other words, one thing contributes to another thing contributes to another thing. It's like a dominoes effect. And it's sad. It's sad that we live in a society to where you have the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor, and of course the mid-class, the working class. If you ain't born with some sort of silver spoon in your mouth, or you got some sort of ancestors that's already got money or something going on in your particular life that's for the betterment, the odds of the working class now becoming the wealthy class in today's society, regardless whether you be in America or Europe or Russia or wherever, is almost slim to none. And I'm going to say, because of this coronavirus, you know, they claimed that there was a millionaire that become an established millionaire once a day over in China because of their outstanding economy. Well, do you think that's going to continue that up? No way. It will have offset barriers in areas like you ain't never imagined before. A matter of fact, the very people that have become millionaires in China recently within the past 10 years could very well go broke or bust if this disease continues to escalate and grow worse and worse and worse over into their country. Because you keep in mind, somebody's got to pay somebody to keep the lights on. Somebody's got to pay somebody to bring you a glass of water. Somebody's got to pay somebody to have an extra bed while you're laying there basically dying or fixing to die whenever you're sick like this in a humanitarian form. So whenever you look at the cost of what it can put a burden upon, it's just an unbelievable amount of burden that can be brought upon to humanity in ways unimaginable. Unimaginable on something this humongous, on something this big.
Yep, exactly. Well, so a couple of things. I mean, you had two very tough quarters of growth at that point. A lot of growth being shaved off the second and third quarter in that SARS year. Eventually, the economy recovered, and as I say, it was still growing at 10%. So in the long run, it wasn't such a big hit. But China has slowed down since then. I mean, the Chinese consumer has already been cutting back. Trade has already been hit. So you have China being in a more vulnerable position, in a slower growth position, and at the same time, you have the Chinese economy making up so much more of a percentage of the global economy. I mean, back in 2003, when the SARS virus hit, China represented about 4% of global growth. Today, it's 16% of global growth. That is the largest chunk. So if you start to have a real problem in China, you have to wonder if you're going to see a synchronized global slowdown, which is very interesting because the last 4 global recessions have been caused by the U.S. consumer. I'm starting to wonder now, are we going to see the first global slowdown of the modern era that may be caused by the Chinese consumer?
Sure.
Rana Faruha, always great to get your perspective. Thanks very much. Good to see you.
Thank you, Rana.
That's
A lot of that
hugely
depends on when it peaks and when it starts to go down,
Yeah.
and we don't really have
We don't
a good
know.
timeline on that yet.
But what is clear from what we've seen from the stock markets, everyone clearly very worried, as we've seen right around the world, of a contagion, how long this may go on, and what impact that might have.
Yeah,
in
when you have
United
one of the
States
biggest
and right around
consumer
the world.
bases in the world.
Absolutely.
None of these bigger markets like uncertainty. None of them do. And whenever they start feeling areas of uncertainty, they start backing off and they start being conservative themselves because they know that uncertainty could lead into disaster. So rather than them dive off into an area of uncertainty, they try to be very, very cautious in where they're investing their investments at because they don't like uncertainty. And it could actually cause a rippling effect, just like dominoes, to where one thing affects another thing, and another thing affects another thing, and another thing affects another thing, and it just escalates. It's serious, folks. I'm telling you, this is serious.
Well, the European Council has voted on Brexit, making it official. The UK will leave the EU less than 24 hours from now. That will be at 11 p.m. Friday, our time, London time.
So, in less than 24 hours. The United States and Britain are looking ahead. US Secretary of State and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson have been meeting in London to discuss the two countries' relationship after Brexit. They say if...
Boy, everything's becoming unstable, isn't it? Man, everything's becoming unstable. It's just breaking loose. It's just coming unhinged, isn't it? Wow. It is now official. Whoa.
Fully traded.
And all that suffering over in the Syria area. Oh my God. Talk about a humanitarian crisis that's been in the making now for the past 5 years or longer. That's been as bad or worse than over in places of Africa. Just suffering untold. Oh my God. What does the Bible say? Go back to the Bible. The Bible says to pray that you're worthy in the last days to escape these things that are going to be fallen upon to the earth, or to pray that you're strong enough to endure these things, indicating that these things would be coming up onto the planet because of the suffering of all the sin in the world. It talks about the suffering, and it talks about the sorrows, and it talks about how devastating that these sorrows will be in various cultures and in various countries. And I truly believe that we are just now starting to see the development of areas that go beyond anything that anybody could ever even dream of in the 21st century of happening, and could very well be happening, coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan. It makes me cringe to think of such suffering as this. But once more, things was not handled properly during the Reagan era. That is now going to throw a monkey wrench in the apple cart. Going to upset the apple cart. If there's ever been a time that we needed to pray, folks, and be sincere and earnest, it is today. Good luck to all of us, and shalom. Thank you to my viewers for listening. Today is January the 30th, 2020.